Hi Pip, are you watching the pot? So now I'm ready to put my bundles into the pot. I need to be careful not to get a burn for myself or for Pip. And I have a dry cloth with me, which I'm going to be using to handle the saucepan lid. And something that's really important is that I don't keep the lid off the pot for very long. I need to just get the bundles gently inside and not splash myself. But also I want to get the lid back on so the pot comes up to temperature quickly. And I never put the bundles in if the pot liquid isn't boiling, because I find that I get the best prints when the liquid is hot. So just keep that in mind when you're eco printing. Try and keep the pot liquid bubbling the whole time that you are working. So I'm always very careful when I'm dealing with the pot to have a dry cloth in my hand, because the pot gets extremely hot. And I also have fire tongs. What I'm going to do is lift the lid up, move the leaves aside with the fire tongs, and I'm going to carefully put my two pieces in the pot, put the leaves on top of them and put the lid on quickly. And I will use the string to tie the bundles to the handle. And then I'm going to set my alarm clock so that I know how long they have been in here. And Pip loves this because she really enjoys steam. So here goes. And I can see that the water is actually boiling. I always put the longest bundle in first. And I'll tie this here. Then the shorter bundle. And it's really important that the bundles go totally underneath the pot liquid. So just make sure. Yep. And once I'm confident that the bundles are underneath the pot liquid, and I've put a few leaves on top of them, I put the lid back on. But I'm going to need to check this regularly. I don't want the pot liquid to evaporate too much. So I have some water here that I can add to the pot if necessary. And it's also important to say, I have this pot outside, but if you can only process in your kitchen, I advise you wear a mask and you have your windows open for ventilation. But if you are processing outside, you need to be careful of the wind. So if the wind gets up any more, I might have to put this inside in my garage. But for now, everything is okay. So I will just check this in about 5 minutes time to make sure that the pot liquid has come back up to that bubbling boil. There's more energy in the pot at that stage, and it helps achieve the best prints on the fabric. And if the wind isn't too strong, I may be able to turn the propane down a little bit at the front. But if the wind continues and is strong, I may need to keep the burners at their maximum output for the whole processing time. In relation to the time the bundles will be in the pot, onion skins give fantastic prints after 2 hours, but the eucalyptus like a longer processing time. And I'm going to leave these in for 2.5 hours, and then we'll take them out and you're going to see the results I have. When I'm working with certain other eucalyptus varieties, some of them actually need 5 hours processing. So you just need to know your own vegetation. And as a beginner, I cannot recommend enough that you start with onion skins. Then when you're familiar with rolling your bundles, you can then experiment with more vegetation. So now Pip will watch this, I think. She's fascinated with steam, as you can see. Good girl. And so far, she's never got burnt, but she'll watch that and I'll come back in 5 minutes and check the temperature. So the bundles have been boiling in the pot for 2 hours and 40 minutes now. Unfortunately, the wind is preventing the liquid bubbling as much as I would really like it to do. So what I'm going to do now is turn the heat off and remove the bundles. But I will open the first piece of felt, and if I'm not happy with the quality of the printing, I will then transfer the second bundle to another pot, a smaller pot, on my cooker in the kitchen, and maybe give it another 20 minutes or 30 minutes processing. The heat is a very important factor in influencing the colour that is achievable. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually turn the gas off. And when I do that from the safety perspective, I would always immediately turn the gas off at the regulator and take it off. I cannot emphasize enough, health and safety is really important when you are working. And it goes without saying that the pot that I am using to eco-print in is not going to be used to cook food again. Keep your pot separate. So the next part of the process is to lift the lid off and remove the bundles. But what I don't want to do is get a steam burn, and I have safety footwear on. If you're eco-printing in a warmer climate, be careful not to have flip-flops or some sort of sandals that you can burn your feet. Just be mindful about what you're wearing. Pip loves this part of the process. Oh, Pip. And actually, before I take the bundles out, if you'd like to have a look inside the pot, because I had eucalyptus leaves in the pot, you can see this slick of oil on the surface. And that's the natural oil that has come out from the eucalyptus leaves. And everything looks really dark and black now. And that's a combination of the vinegar, the leaves, and the rusty metal that I put in the pot. That's why this process is also known as eco-printing in the dirty pot. It does look dirty. So, if you remember, I tied the bundles onto the handle of the pot, and I need to be careful when I lift them out, because often vegetation will get caught in the pipe, and I don't want that to drip on my foot. So what I like to do is just lift it out of the pot and put it straight down onto the gravel or some piece of stone. This is the piece here that was rolled up on the rusty metal pipe. Now I'm putting the lid back on the pot because once I open the first piece of felt, if I'm not happy with the prints, I will be able to just bring this liquid back up to a boil very quickly. But if you're using a domestic saucepan or pot for your eco-printing, it's very important that you let the liquid cool down, and once the liquid has got cold, that you transfer it to a bucket. Something like a plastic bucket or maybe a big plastic dustbin or trash can. Obviously you need the liquid cold because you don't want to make a hole in the bucket or the tub. And the reason for that is that the domestic saucepan has a thinner side to the aluminium. And because there's a lot of rusty metal in the pot, what can happen is that rusty metal and the dirty pot liquid will eat a hole in the edge of your pot and you won't be able to use it again. And you can trust me on that. I bought a new pot, the same size as this one, on a trip to France. I used it once. I didn't take the pot liquid out, and within 4 days it had holes on the side of it. So unless you have a thick walled saucepan with a thickness of 6 millimeters or more, take the liquid out. And then the next time you're going to eco-print, just put it back into your pot and away you go. So let's head back up to the studio now and we will reveal the prints on these pieces of fabric. So opening the bundles is like my birthday and every celebration day during the year rolled into one. At the moment, this looks very dark, and that's because of the influence of the colour that is in the actual pot from the eucalyptus leaves, the rusty metal, and the reaction with the vinegar. But as I open this piece and unroll it, I think you're going to see it's much lighter inside. So the important thing now is to use a very, very sharp scissors and not to cut the fabric. In this case, it's felt, but if it's a fine piece of fabric like silk, it's even easier to actually make a mistake and cut the fabric. So my tip for you is to get the knot and to pull that piece of thread up so you can easily get the tips of your scissors under the thread or the string, and make sure that the tips are pointing up before you cut. And then roll the piece away from you, gathering the string as you go. And at this stage, I'm not trying to remove the leaves, I'm just trying to remove the string. And I don't bother washing this string, I just let this dry, and then I tie all the pieces together and reuse it. And the great news is that I can see already there are going to be some beautiful red prints from some of the leaves. So this is really super. These rounder leaves, which have given that round red print with the resist marks from the string, these are the Eucalyptus gunnii, the named variety Azura. Then these longer leaves, which have not given a red print. I actually don't know what this variety of eucalyptus is, but these plants were given to me by the greenkeeper of Courttown Golf Club, a beautiful golf club in the southeast of Ireland. And he just gave me a present of them when he discovered me picking up leaves on the golf course one day. And then on the inside, we're going to see the Eucalyptus parvula leaves. As a new eco printer, it's very tempting to grab all the leaves and fling them off as you are opening your bundles. But I highly recommend that you try and leave the leaves on your fabric where you actually position them, and that you do document the process, that you take photographs while you're working in the studio so that you can then review and see what plant has given you what print. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. I'm making sure that the leaves are going down on the felt where I initially left them or laid them. And it's obvious as I'm coming along that the fabric is lighter in the center. It's darker at the outside because that's influence from the pot. This is the outside edge of the felt, and then this is going to be a stripe down the middle. So this could end up as a beautiful wall hanging, hopefully, or a very nice table runner. And down here now, I can see that this was one of the leaves that had a really raggedy edge. Beautiful. And these pieces will be given a really good wash shortly until they run clear, but we'll discuss that in a minute. What I have to be careful about is not burning my hands, because I have to say I'm always tempted to open these bundles while they're still warm, but it's probably better for you just to let them get a bit cooler before you open them. And this is the bundle that was rolled on the rusty metal pipe. And I'll pick the leaves off carefully. So the round leaves, Azura, so Eucalyptus gunnii azura. This leaf, no idea. And this leaf is the Eucalyptus parvula. So it's always really exciting, for me anyway. But if you don't have access to eucalyptus leaves, if you remember, the inside of this piece is onion skins. And honestly, I think that everybody has access to onion skins, and that's one of the reasons I recommend that you try them, particularly as a new eco printer. And also, they will always give you a good print. So, the big reveal. And in this case, these prints are going to be a mirror image of each other. And you can see here, that's the mirror image of that. So I would be very happy with this. Because of my experience, I know when this is washed and ironed, how much more the embellishing fiber on the felt is going to shimmer. And this piece is going to be really nice, I hope. I think so. And with the vegetation that I removed from the bundles, I just put this on my compost heap. It's easy and tempting to think if you don't lift all the vegetation off, when it gets dry, you'll be able to brush it off or it will fall off. In fact, the opposite is true. It's almost like it sticks on the fabric. So I fully advise you to remove all your onion skins or your leaves before you are finished. So this here is one side. And this here is the side with the leaves. So in this case, the design is not a mirror image. What happens is that the leaves print on both sides, but the print is offset. So this leaf here has printed here, this has printed here, and the whole way down. Those two leaves there have printed here. And these are offset by the diameter of the pipe. So the wider the pipe that I roll up on, the further apart the prints are. So there's a balance to this piece, but it's not symmetrical. And the darker color up here at this upper surface, this is where the rusty metal pipe was. And then down here, this is where the stripe marks are. And any piece that's rolled up on a rusty metal pipe needs to be neutralized, which I will share with you after I've opened the other piece. Otherwise, that rusty metal could, with time, eat into the fabric and the fabric would deteriorate a little bit. So now let's open the piece printed with the same vegetation but rolled up on a copper pipe. It's going to be interesting to see if there is a different color on the inside of this bundle. The prints may not be quite as intense as the ones on the rusty metal pipe. And already, in fact, I can see that. So this leaf here, which is a Eucalyptus parvula, it's printed more of an orange color rather than a red color. And that's because the copper pipe acts in a similar way to a copper sulfate mordant, but it's much slower. So when I'm using the metal pipe in the pot, the copper is not having such a strong reaction as the rusty metal. So keeping the leaves down. This is very intense here. I love this color. This is the Eucalyptus gunnii azura. And you may notice that the nearer I get to the copper pipe, this background color is becoming a little bit more golden. And I'm expecting when I get to the end that there will be stronger prints at this end, and there will be some interesting color from the copper. And here we go. And you can actually see the difference in color in this leaf. This bit here, the copper was in contact with it, and there it wasn't. But isn't that beautiful, the modification of color from the copper pipe? So now I'll just take the leaves off. I think when we compare the two pieces of felt together, it's going to be noticeable that the longer leaves from the unidentified eucalyptus tree have not printed as strongly on the copper piece. They're stronger on the piece that was rolled up on the rusty metal. And now for the reveal of the onion skin. Ooh, beautiful. What's also very interesting here today is that the onion skins have printed almost identical colors from both sides of them. They don't always do that. And that's why I make sure some are positioned up and some down on the fabric. Now I'm just going to get the other piece again, and I'll put the two pieces side by side on the table so we can just have a quick look at them. And then I'll bring them inside to neutralize and wash them. So when I position the two pieces side by side, there's a subtle difference in the color. It's not especially dramatic, but I think it is obvious that this piece is lighter and heading towards more golden tones up at the top. This is the end that the copper pipe was. And then this piece here, which was rolled on the rusty metal, if I put the two one on top of the other, you can see clearly that this one is a lot darker. And let's turn it over and let's see what it's like on the other side when we compare them. So in both cases, the bottom portion that was tied with the string and had leaves underneath, it looks pretty similar. But the further up we go, this one becomes lighter and more golden, and this one is darker. But I think when you see the two pieces side by side, you can see that the leaf prints from the big eucalyptus leaf are stronger, and to my mind, they're better on the piece that was rolled up on the rusty metal pipe. And that's because iron, or ferrous sulfate, is a powerful mordant, and it makes pieces darker. So with the copper, the leaf prints are very faint, the big leaf prints. And the big leaf prints are very much stronger with the rusty metal. But something else that I can also notice is that the red prints from the Gunnii Azura are more of a tomato red color here on the copper piece, and then they're shifting slightly towards more of a burgundy red with this piece here, which was on the rusty metal. So these are all the sorts of subtleties that once you start printing with vegetation and you get familiar with your materials and with your pipes, you will be able to influence the color of your textiles. So now we just need to wash these out and finish them, give them an iron. Let's go down to the house and let's do that now. So now I'm ready to wash out my 2 pieces of felt. And it is important not to put any of your eco-printed fabric onto your wooden work surfaces when you have taken it out of the pot if you have not washed it already. And the reason for that is because of the rusty metal that was in the pot. There could be a reaction with the fabric and the tannin in your wood, and you could stain your timber work surfaces. So these are going to get a good wash, and the piece that was rolled up on the rusty metal is also going to be neutralized. I like to do them separately to start with because this is a darker piece than this one. And then I will put both of these together in my washing machine, and I will put them through on a wool cycle in the washing machine to give them an even more intensive wash. I'm going to take the copper one out for a minute, and I'm going to start with this one. So initially when I turn the tap on, this is going to look really dirty, the water. And this is just an initial rinse. It's not looking as dirty as I said it would. But the end where the string was will be releasing the most colour. And something else to note is the fact that I'm not afraid to use warm water to wash my felt, and also the boiling water in the eco-printing pot, because if the pieces are wrapped up tightly enough, there won't be any shrinkage. So as I mentioned earlier, before we started printing, I like to prepare my fabric by giving it a good wash with an olive oil soap or some form of a gentle handmade soap. And this is the soap that I also use for the washing out of the pieces. You do not want to use a detergent or one of the eco-friendly washing liquids, because you may run the risk of losing some of your prints. So I highly recommend a gentle olive oil soap for this part of the process. So although the water here is still looking dirty, it's not running clear, this is just the initial rinse or wash that I'm giving this piece of fabric, and next I'm going to neutralize it before it gets a full wash until the water does look totally clean. So to prevent the rusty metal continuing to have a reaction with the fabric, I'm going to neutralize this now. And I use either bicarbonate of soda, or in this case, I actually have baking powder. In Ireland, we can use bread soda. And what I do is I put probably 1.5 teaspoons into the sink for this sort of biggish piece of felt. If I was neutralizing a silk scarf, I would only use maybe 1/3 teaspoon of the powder, but this is a bigger piece, so I just want to make sure that the rust isn't going to damage the fabric over time. So I just make sure that the powder has dissolved. And then this is the end that was in direct contact with the rusty metal. So I'll make sure that that is in the liquid there. So I often get asked, what about the rusty metal that's in the pot? The only time you need to neutralize the fabric is when the fabric itself is in contact with iron. And that iron can be rusty or not rusty. But if it's in contact with iron, you neutralize. Or in the case of the other piece of felt, I had that rolled up on copper. That doesn't need to be neutralized. So whatever you're neutralizing needs to be in the solution of the bicarbonate of soda or baking powder and water for at least 15 minutes. And it's always better to have a little more liquid rather than a little bit less. So this piece now needs to be left in this solution for a minimum of 15 minutes. Sometimes I would leave it for half an hour or even up to an hour if I was taking a break from eco-printing and maybe going to have some lunch. And then the piece gets washed with the gentle soap until the water runs totally clear. Now you can do this by hand at home, or because I have 2 big pieces, I'm actually going to use my washing machine. And in a modern washing machine, you can wash your wool or your felt at approximately 20 degrees or 30 degrees Celsius and give it a good wash with plenty of water, a little bit of the soap, and then you know that your pieces are ready to iron when they come out of the machine. So when I'm ironing my pieces to finish, I like to use the hottest setting on my iron, and I use steam. And all I do is make sure to move the iron quickly over the fabric, and certain pieces can have a tendency to distort in the pot. For example, if I was printing a knitted top, it might twist slightly. So as I'm steaming, I can actually pull the pieces or the edge of the felt and make it a little bit more even. I also iron my silk on the hottest setting. So don't be nervous. Actually, when I started eco-printing, I used to allow the pieces dry and I would leave them for a couple of weeks before I would iron them. And what I discovered was that led to far more creases in the fabric, and I didn't find that I got any better result. So don't be afraid to wash them on the day or the day after you print them. Equally, if you want to leave them for a couple of weeks, you can. But in my experience, I haven't got any better results. So actually, I ironed the piece that was rolled up on the copper first. I'm going to now iron the longer piece, and then we'll take them and compare them side by side and see is there a different result with the prints. When I turn over to this side here, which is the onion skin printed side on this piece, you can see the cellulose fiber that I put on the top of my felt. It's actually standing out more against the surface because it doesn't absorb the same amount of the natural dye from the onion skins as the wool does. Now, these two pieces have been ironed while they're damp. I'm just going to leave them here in front of the cooker for a few minutes. I'm going to put the ironing board and the iron away, and then I'm going to assess them side by side to see the difference in the colour from the bundle that was wrapped up on a copper pipe and the bundle that was wrapped up on the rusty metal pipe. So when we compare the results of the two pieces of eco-printed felt, I think you can see how beautiful onion skins are on wool fabric. And if you're not a felt maker, you can just use a piece of an old woolen blanket or a wool jumper, any sort of wool, silk or cashmere that you like, and achieve crisp prints like this too. And this smaller piece in my hand, this is the piece that was rolled up on the copper pipe. You can actually see here where the copper made direct contact with the fabric. I'm going to turn this over in a minute so we can see the other side. And this longer piece here, which was the first one that I rolled up when I was showing you the tutorial, this was rolled on the cast iron pipe, the rusty metal pipe, and it's much darker there. But can you see that the background color of the piece that was rolled on the rusty metal is a much more silvery gray color than this piece which was rolled on the copper pipe? And this just, to me, is really pleasing. My preference is for the darker piece, but many people, their preference would be for the lighter piece. And when I turn the pieces over, you're going to actually see quite a difference on the side where I put the eucalyptus leaves. So now that the felt has been turned over and we're looking at the sides that were printed with the eucalyptus leaves, it's very obvious that the piece of felt that was wrapped up on the rusty metal, the leaf prints are much stronger, particularly with the nibbled eucalyptus leaves. They are very, very much more obvious than the leaf prints are from that nibbled leaf here on the felt that was wrapped up on the copper. And there's a more golden undertone to the background of the copper piece, and again, just that more silvery or grey backdrop to the piece that was wrapped up on the rusty metal. And either of these pieces would look beautiful hung on a wall or used as a table runner. Felt is particularly good as an insulating material, so you can put something hot on top of this and it won't damage your table underneath. So at the end of any eco-printing session, you will probably discover that your hands are looking quite stained, even if you have washed them. I got a fantastic tip from one of my students. She was a dentist, and I couldn't believe that she was quite happy getting her hands so dirty. So in fact, she shared this wonderful tip. You just cut a fresh lemon in half and you scrub the lemon juice onto your hands, and then you just use your simple olive oil soap, and lo and behold, all the stains are removed naturally. So that's what I do every time when I'm finished eco-printing and when I might be going shopping. If I was going to be eco-printing again tomorrow, to be honest, I don't mind if my hands look a little bit stained. But if I am going out in public, I'm conscious that other people might prefer them to look clean. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. And I do urge you, if you're new to eco-printing, start with onion skins. Make sure that you use an aluminium saucepan and make sure that your pot liquid is boiling and bubbling, and you keep the pieces in the pot for approximately 2.5 hours. The important thing is that you have fun and that you are doing this in a health conscious and an environmentally mindful way. So thanks very much for your attention. Have fun, and over and out from Cláisín.